Hi-yo, friends, and welcome to The Flick. I'm Christy, this is Alonso, this is Ben.
Hi-yo, friends!
We're not wearing our masks.
Away!
Did you know who we were without our masks?
Yeah.
Our cover is blown.
Please who should be wearing masks? Everyone involved in this.
Except for Armie Hammer. That's the problem. Go ahead.
So the Lone Ranger, everybody knew what, the rep preceded this movie significantly, and stop that, Lawrence! That's bullshit!
We're a professional show here, damn it.
Right. Yeah. Would you fucking sneeze during Pop Trigger? I don't fucking think so.
I'm sorry, continue.
The Lone Ranger. So, but when it came, when there was so much I felt excitement about it by that early description of the Lone Ranger. And I'll describe it in 1 second, but you know what it's about. It's about the Lone frickin' Ranger. That Johnny Depp was playing Tonto, and it would focus on that, and that was interesting, and that Johnny Depp's position about why is Tonto subservient to the Lone Ranger the way he was in the radio show and then on television. So that I was excited for it, but then you got this rep that it was going to blow, and I thought maybe expectations were so low that I would actually like it. But that didn't happen. As Christy said, it's a Lone Ranger origin story. Mm-hmm. It's 1933, which is when the Lone Ranger debuted on radio. I learned that from the 475-page press notes that they handed out with this.
So many trees died for this movie.
So the Lone Ranger debuted on radio in 1933. A kid is at a fair in San Francisco, and there's an Old West exhibit, and part of that Old West exhibit is in fact Tonto. And he tells the kid the origin story of the Lone Ranger over what seemed like 4.5
hours. I buried you.
Why am I alive?
Horse says you are a spirit walker. A man who has been to the other side and returned. A man who cannot be killed in battle. Justice is what I seek, Kimosabe.
So yeah, it was long, but actually, unlike most movies that are too long, I liked it better at the end.
Because it was ending?
Well, partially because you knew it was ending.
It finally becomes a Lone Ranger movie?
It finally became the Lone Ranger, and, as I called this up, when this actually happened, and God bless him for doing it, when that actually happened, you were...
It's the best part of the whole movie.
No, my hair stood up. I was like, yeah!
It's finally, he's on the horse, on a train, and Rossini kicks in, and you're like, okay, now, finally, after 3 hours, it's a Lone Ranger movie.
And they didn't, and I guess because it's a relevant classical piece that people care about, they didn't mess with it. They didn't they didn't make the James Bond.
Jay-Z doesn't remix it.
No, it is what you expect it to be. And it went on for a while, and that was a pretty good chase sequence, and I was into it, and it's just very rare that in a 2-hour and 20-minute movie, something like that, that the last 25 minutes are the most entertaining.
But even that gave me about 45 seconds of unalloyed pleasure before we were back to the Gore Verbinski, overdone, big finale chase sequence where you don't know where anybody is in relation to anybody else, how the physics are supposed to work for this thing, what they're even trying to accomplish. It's just...
That's a great point, and this is to me the prototype for that. I mean, I thought 6 times, who's on what train?
Where are they?
Why are there 2 tracks?
Right.
Are those going to run into each other? They go under? How is?
I thought getting 1 track laid was the big challenge of this movie. Suddenly there's 2 next to each other. Where did each other?
Like on the opposite sides of a river, and then they come together, and there's a moment where the Lone Ranger says to Tonto, "What about the silver?" And they're like, "Oh, we got to get the silver," and you're like, Why do you guys care about getting the silver? Like, why do they care where the silver goes?
I mean,
it's independent. It's on its own, and nobody's going to die with the silver. It all seemed nonsense.
But that whole big sequence is kind of like a little microcosm of the movie as a whole, in terms of it's got all these different ideas, all these different themes, all these different tones going on in their own directions, and none of them are like on the same track with each other. So that the thing with like the runaway train is actually entirely too
And
emblematic.
they're all going 200 miles an hour.
Oh my God. I mean, and I know Johnny Depp is doing the same fucking thing he's done for pretty much every single movie since Edward Scissorhands, and it works quite often. But the whole like being quiet and looking around and aren't I odd? Look at me being odd.
He's being all deadpan, which occasionally is funny, but the movie wants to like completely deconstruct and mock the Lone Ranger legend, and at the same time sell it to us as this big giant summer tentpole franchise thing.
It's also a big white guilt apology.
Kind of, yeah, which is fine. I mean, that's the whole thing of westerns of the last few decades. I mean, Heaven's Gate even, that was that kind of, it's basically sort of this sort of anti-capitalist, how we destroyed the, native populations with our greed and railroads thing. Whatever, you can do that in a movie and still make it interesting. But to throw that in and to throw this, I mean, like every time they run into somebody new, they ask the Lone Ranger, what's with the mask? Like that's the running gag of this movie. And after a while, it's like, okay, if you think the hero in this movie, the guy in the title, is such a dipshit, then why do we care? Why are we subscribed? Call the movie Tonto if you want to make this subversive thing. But we're supposed to be laughing at him and still taking this whole thing seriously at the same time.
And I don't know, I didn't get why we were laughing at him. I mean, he was...
At who, at Tonto or Lone
At
Ranger?
Lone Ranger. I mean, like, he was a bit of a dork, I guess, and he wasn't a real tough guy of the West. His brother, who was James Badgedale, who's in every movie, that was the tough guy, and he was the sort of by-the-book lawman.
Fancy pants,
right,
slicker,
but that said, he was a decent guy and very courageous. He wasn't afraid in any way. He just didn't want, like, I didn't know why that guy was supposed to be the object of the audience's derision. Like, to me, that's sort of a guy you admire.
He's buff, gorgeous, 6'5" Armie Hammer.
And doesn't want to hurt people.
Yeah, he's built like a superhero. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. And his trajectory from like sort of smart nerd to Western badass could have been an interesting story, but they don't want to tell it. Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let's say, I have a real problem with Armie Hammer being cast in this. Because why do you put Armie Hammer in a movie and then cover up his face half the time? This is a problem. No, seriously.
They did it in J. Edgar.
That's true. But this is a problem, though. Is like, I want to see him without the mask on. He's so gorgeous. But he has to get, and also,
there's like two great-looking dudes in this movie, then, who we don't get to see.
Right, yeah.
But also, I think if you had just seen him in this, if this is the first movie you ever saw with Armie Hammer, you would not know what the fuss is about Armie Hammer, because in Social Network, he has so much work to do. It has to make two twins as distinctive people. In J. Edgar, that everyone liked, he brings some vulnerabilities and pathos to it.
He's really good.
Even Mirror Mirror, the much derided Mirror Mirror, he has to be goofy and charming, and he's got comic timing. I think none of that is used at all in a good way here.
It's used here. I didn't think this movie was as bad as you guys. Don't get me wrong, as you'll see from my score, I didn't like it. But I just thought I found it forgettable and wasting of an hour and 41 minutes before it finally got going in a final scene that I have complaints about too.
I found it joyless. Like, there's no. I mean, you see a movie like Fast 6 or whatever. No matter how stupid and improbable the big action set pieces are, you feel that flutter of. And you get excited about it, and you're ducking things, and you're like, "Oh, make the jump!" And this movie,
Yeah, there was a lot of that. I laughed a few times. I laughed more than you, sitting next to you, and I
have no fun to watch a movie with. I just sit there.
You suck to
I
watch
laughed
a
at
movie.
the last line where he goes, "Don't ever do that again."
Yeah, right. The last line, the funniest line in the movie.
But even that scene is another way of like, let's make fun of the traditional Lone Ranger and show him as a boob, which. But
I didn't get. It's funny. I didn't get that because he's a likable boob, I guess, But I also think then the manner, the used but occasionally effective manner of telling the story, it didn't quite make sense to me because the kid seemed weird. The way they have the kid go to the sort of Western museum.
Or the whole framing device?
Yeah, the framing device.
It was a waste of time.
It was a waste of time.
It's Johnny Depp and more
unnecessary.
makeup.
Which is right.
It's Johnny Depp.
Right, it is Johnny Depp playing a guy who, Tonto, it has to be 95 or something in 1933.
Total waste of time.
And I didn't quite get that it was a story that you told, like it didn't feel like a story. It didn't feel like and then what happened next, and what happened next. Like every time they went back to the kid talking to Tonto, I was like, oh yeah, this is happening. Like this thing is going on.
Like these giant summer blockbusters do not loan themselves to the idea that someone is telling them as a story, because they tend to just sort of be this confluence of events all jammed up together. It's not like, you can't imagine somebody sitting around the campfire and relating the tale of, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull,
We talked really fast about this great supporting cast that kind of goes to waste.
Yeah, there's good actors.
Tom Wilkinson,
William Fichtner, James Badgedale.
Yeah, it took me a
Bonham
long time to
Carter.
figure out
Barry
that was William Fichtner.
Oh, yeah.
Because he seemed younger in this.
Well, they make him up very weirdly.
Yeah, but he's really good. He's always really good.
I mean, Helena Bonham Carter, I think the gun hidden in her leg would have been cool if we hadn't already seen that in Planet Terror.
No, that's right. Where her entire leg was a gun.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. I thought that was cool. But
Pepper.
Barry Pepper,
Barry Pepper doing Richard Mulligan in Little Big Man as Custer.
and who showed up at the end as always without consistently we don't get enough of Stephen Root.
Stephen Root's in like 2 scenes.
Yeah.
I was so happy to see him. I'm like, hey, Stephen Root's gonna fix it, and then he doesn't.
There's never enough.
He's never
Stephen
given it
Root.
a chance. So yeah, it feels like a waste of all these people.
Yeah. So anyway, but it was the end was great. So I pulled it up, and we're gonna hear the rest of it, and then we'll go.
It's the best part of the whole.
Because this was the full what I remember watching the show, and I've seen. And then the guy comes with the voice.
Oh, right.
Did you watch the show as a kid? Did you watch the show as a kid?
Not really.
I did not.
Here it is. So good. And
That was thrilling in the movie.
with his faithful Indian companion Tonto, and then the other great line in it is thrilling days of yesteryear.
This was not thrilling.
This was not thrilling. Yeah.
Bloated, overpowering.
Bring back Clinton Spilsbury.
Lone Ranger rides again, thrilling days of yesteryear, right. The Lone Ranger didn't ride again for a whole long time, and it wasn't thrilling.
Will this be the beginning of a franchise, or will this tank so badly that any hope for further films is just destroyed?
I hope there are no sequels, and I hope there are no rides.
Rides based on sequels.
Either.
But you can tell, like, they're trying to set something up here
no,
for the
no,
future,
obviously.
and I don't think it's going to happen.
No, I don't think public demand is going to be clamoring for more of this, but
What was the tweet I
stranger
saw?
things have happened.
Grady Smith at EW, who does box office for EW, wrote something on Twitter that was really interesting, that this will have to make $40 million more than the highest grossing Western ever, which was Dances with Wolves, which made $184 million in 1990. It will have to make $40 million in that just to make back its budget.
Boy. Yeah,
That's not going to happen.
Doesn't seem like it's going to happen.
To quote the tweet of my now federally recognized husband, Dave White at movies.com, my favorite part of The Lone Ranger is when the digital ghost of John Ford showed up and told everyone to go fuck themselves.
All right, what is your number upon that note?
3.3.
3.
I give it a 4.2 for the theme.
Thank you, Rossini.
Yeah, so that's a 3.5 for the Lone Ranger.
And it's getting trashed on Rotten Tomatoes, right?
It's a 24% on Rotten Tomatoes, which means there's 1 out of 4 people who like it.
So far. Right.